Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a scenario that I think everyone listening has probably experienced at least once. You're at work, or maybe you're trying to learn a new language on your own, and you open up this new piece of software. And immediately, you're just bombarded with badges and points, and maybe a little cartoon mascot
A
doing
little dance, yeah,
a...
the classic gamification veneer.
Exactly. It's like they took a boring task and just dipped it in chocolate to trick you into eating it. The assumption behind all of that is, well, it's a billion-dollar assumption,
I
really.
know for sure.
If we make it fun, people will learn better. We just assume fun is the magic ingredient that downloads information into our brains.
It's the chocolate-covered broccoli strategy. And honestly, it's one of the most pervasive myths in both education and corporate training.
Well, today, we are going to rigorously test that assumption. We are doing a deep dive into Volume 2 of Habilitation Thesis by Julian Alvarez, and we're specifically zeroing in on Chapter 6, which is titled Game, Pleasure, and Motivation.
And I have to say, for an academic text, this chapter is surprisingly rebellious. It really shakes up the foundations of what we think a serious game is even supposed to do. It basically asks, do you actually need to have fun to learn from a game?
That is the mission for this deep dive. We're going to deconstruct the relationship between having a ludic attitude, which is just fancy talk for a playful mindset, and actually understanding a message. We're going to look at whether the fun part is necessary or if it might even be a distraction.
Which sets up the central tension Alvarez explores right in the text, this conflict between play and serious. We usually define play as, free, frivolous, done for its own sake, and we define serious as utilitarian, productive, and often, well, a grind.
So to get to the bottom of this, we have to look at a really specific and honestly quite dark experiment that Alvarez cites in section 6.3. This wasn't testing Mario Kart or Tetris. He used a game called September 12th by Gonzalo Frasca.
Right. And context is crucial here because September 12th isn't designed to be fun in that traditional sense. It's a news game that was released shortly after the 9/11 attacks. The setting is a bustling Middle Eastern town. You, the player, are looking down from the sky through, let's say, a sniper scope or a missile reticle. You see terrorists walking around, but they are mixed in with civilians, women, children, people just going about their day.
And the mechanics are deceptively simple, right? You point, you click, you shoot a missile.
Yeah.
The goal seems to be kill the bad guys. It feels like standard video game logic.
Exactly. But Frasca introduced two critical mechanics that completely subvert that logic. First, there's a significant delay between when you click and when the missile actually hits. Second, the blast radius is large, so it is practically impossible to hit a terrorist without also killing civilians nearby.
And this is where the simulation part really kicks in. When civilians are killed, other civilians gather around to mourn them, and then right there on screen, those mourning civilians transform into new terrorists.
It's a brutal feedback loop. The more you shoot, the more enemies you create. The town eventually becomes completely overrun. The only way to win, or at least the only way to stop the cycle of violence, is to choose not to shoot, to do nothing.
It's a powerful, somber message. Violence begets violence. But the experiment Alvarez references didn't just look at the game design, it looked at the players. Researchers tested users to see if there was a connection between finding the game amusing, having that ludic attitude, and actually understanding the message.
And conventional wisdom would say yes, right. If you're engaged, if you're into the game, enjoying the mechanics, you should get the point better.
That's what I would have bet money on. But the data says...
It's a flat line.
Yep.
Zero correlation. The text describes a Meyer diagram, basically a target plot where they mapped out user responses, and the results were scattered everywhere. You had people who treated the game as a pure toy. They were just blowing things up for the fun of it. They had high ludic scores. They were having a great time, but they completely missed the political commentary.
So they were basically playing Space Invaders with a different skin. They were playing, but they weren't learning.
Precisely. But then you had this other group that is, I think, really fascinating. These were people who did not find the game fun. They might have found it disturbing or boring or just a grim simulation. They had zero ludic attitude, but they understood the message perfectly. They hit the bullseye on the utility target.
This is the aha moment for me. This proves that you don't need the sugar to swallow the medicine. The study shows you can treat a game like a tool, a simulation to be analyzed, and walk away with 100% of the learning without ever cracking a smile.
It completely decouples play from learning. Alvarez argues that a user does not need to adopt a ludic attitude, that let's pretend mindset, to receive the utility message. You can approach a serious game with the same mindset you'd approach a spreadsheet or a textbook, and the device still works.
There's another layer to this study that I think is really important, especially for how we design these things. It's the comparison the text makes between September 12th and another game called Energai.
Right, and this comparison highlights the problem of subjectivity in games. Energy is simple. You turn off the lights, you save energy. The message is closed. There's really only one way to interpret it. September 12th, however, is open.
The text mentions that a pro-gun advocate could play September 12th, see the exact same mechanics, missiles creating more terrorists, and come to a totally different conclusion than the designer intended.
It's fascinating. The designer, Frasca, is saying violence doesn't work, it creates more enemies. The pro-gun player might look at the delay in the blast radius and think, the problem isn't the violence, the problem is that my weapon is too slow and too sloppy. You know, if I had a precision laser or a bigger bomb, I could wipe them out before they recruit.
So they see the utility this strategy is failing, but their bias filters the lesson completely differently. It just goes to show that fun isn't some magic wand that ensures everyone thinks the same way.
It really reinforces that the message in a game is fragile. It depends entirely on the user's background, their culture, and their mindset. You can't just gamify a complex issue and expect everyone to align with your view just because they earned a high score.
This leads us to a framework Alvarez lays out in section 6.2 that I found really helpful for visualizing this. He basically categorizes the 4 types of experiences a user can have with a serious game.
Right, it's like a matrix. Imagine a grid. On one axis, you have playful attitude. Did they have fun? On the other, utility perception. Did they get the message?
So let's walk through the quadrants because I think listeners will definitely recognize themselves in these. First, you have category A. This is the holy grail, right?
Category A is the ideal. The user has a playful attitude, and they perceive the utility. They are winning on all fronts, engaged, smiling, and learning. This is what every edtech company promises in their marketing.
Okay. Then you have category B. I feel like this is me when I play historical strategy games sometimes. I'm just painting the map my color, having a blast, but I couldn't tell you a single thing about the actual history I'm supposed to be managing.
Right, category B is the gamer. You have the playful attitude, you're having fun, but you miss the utility. In the context of a serious game, this is actually a failure of the device. It's the student who plays the math game just to collect the coins but clicks randomly until they get the right answer. They aren't learning math, they are learning how to game the system.
That is such a huge critique of bad gamification. Just because they are clicking doesn't mean they are learning. Okay, then we have category C. This is the one that validates the September 12th results we just talked about.
Yes, category C is the worker, or the student. The user has no playful attitude, they are not amused, they're treating this like an exercise or a job. However, they do perceive the utility, they understand the message perfectly.
And the text makes a big point here. This is valid. This is not a failure.
It's crucial. Alvarez argues that a serious game doesn't fail just because the user isn't laughing. If the goal is to transfer a skill like knowing how to operate a nuclear reactor and category C achieves that, the device has succeeded. The game part was just a vessel. And even if the user stripped away the fun, the mission was accomplished.
That takes so much pressure off. We don't have to force people to enjoy it. We just have to ensure they understand it. And then, of course, there's category D.
The miss. No play, no utility, you're bored and you didn't learn anything. Total failure of the device.
So if category C proves that we don't strictly need fun to learn, it raises a huge question, which the text tackles in section 6.5. Why do we use games at all? Why are we so obsessed with making things ludic? Why not just give everyone a textbook and call it a day?
This is where the deep dive gets really philosophical, and I think this is the most insightful part of the chapter. Alvarez references a survey by Michel Levine. He asked students what makes a game pleasurable, and the answers were all over the map, 23 different criteria. Competition, destruction, freedom, story, discovery.
It wasn't just because it's funny.
No. And here's the insight that links it all together. The text brings in Aristotle.
Bringing out the big guns.
Aristotle argued that sight is the sense that gives us the most knowledge, and that knowledge itself provides a unique kind of pleasure. The text suggests that what we call ludic pleasure, the fun of playing, might actually be, at its core, the pleasure of learning.
Wait, unpack that. You're saying the fun is just your brain rewarding you for learning.
Think about it. What is competition or challenge in a game? It's assessing your own capabilities. It's learning about yourself. What is exploration? It's acquiring knowledge about an environment. What is strategy? It's developing logical reflection.
So when I finally beat a boss in a video game after 10 tries, that rush of dopamine, that's not just victory, that's my brain saying, good job, you learned the pattern.
Precisely. Alvarez posits that play and learning aren't opposites. They trigger very similar reward circuits. The fun is the brain's way of encouraging you to master a new system. So asking, should it be fun or educational, is a false dichotomy. The fun is the education happening in real time.
That reframes everything. It's not about slathering fun on top of learning, like icing on a cake. The cake is the fun. But if pleasure is the sensation, we still need to talk about what drives us to even start eating the cake. We need to talk about motivation.
Right. Section 6.7 shifts from pleasure to motivation. The text notes there are something like 101 theories of motivation.
Let's not cover all 101. We only have a few minutes left.
We'll stick to the ones Alvarez focuses on. He highlights Malone's framework, which identifies 4 key intrinsic motivators that game designers use. These are the ingredients for that engagement we want.
Okay, give me the 4 keys. If I'm designing a learning tool, what do I need?
First is challenge. This connects to the concept of flow. It has to be in the Goldilocks zone, not too hard, not too easy. If it's too easy, it's boring. If it's too hard, it's anxiety-inducing. You need just enough struggle to make the brain pay attention.
That makes sense. What's the second?
Curiosity. And Malone breaks this down into sensory curiosity like cool graphics or audio that grabs your attention, and cognitive curiosity. That's the mystery. Why is this happening? It's a paradox you want to solve.
That's the page-turner effect. I need to know the answer. Third.
Control. This is huge. The user needs agency. They need to feel their choices matter. If you're just clicking next, you have no control. You're a passenger. But if you decide whether to build a hospital or a factory, and that choice changes the game, you have control. You're a driver.
And the fourth.
Fantasy. And this doesn't necessarily mean dragons and wizards. It just means context. It turns abstract data into a narrative. Instead of solving a math problem, you are calculating the trajectory to save the spaceship. It makes the activity more emotionally engaging.
The text mentions the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation here, too. Serious games are in a weird spot because they usually start with extrinsic motivation, don't they?
They do. Extrinsic is, you have to play this because your boss said so, or you need to pass this quiz to get the certification. That's the stick. But a good serious game aims to trigger those intrinsic motivators, challenge, curiosity, control, fantasy, so that eventually you want to play because the activity itself is rewarding.
So you start because you have to, maybe you're a category C worker, but then maybe you shift into category A because the design hooks your curiosity.
That's the goal. And this leads us to a really practical example Alvarez cites from Stolovich and Tiagrajan. They compare bingo with a toolbox.
I love this example. It makes the concept so clear. So regular bingo, we all know, a 5x5 grid, numbers are called out, first to 5 in a row wins. The objective is recreational, fun.
Right. Now imagine a variation called toolbox. It's the exact same mechanics, 5x5 grid. But instead of numbers, the squares have pictures of tools. A hammer, a wrench, a screwdriver. The caller shouts out the name of the tool. You have to find the picture.
Okay, so the gameplay is identical. I'm listening, I'm scanning, I'm marking, but the objective has shifted.
The objective is now instructional. Players will be able to associate the names of tools with their appearance. The text argues that in a serious game, the objective shifts. It's not just about winning the bingo game, it's about acquiring the skill of identifying tools.
But there's a fear, isn't there? That if you make it about learning the tools, you kill the game, that it stops being fun because now I have to think.
Alvarez addresses this tension directly. He argues it's not a destruction of the game, it's a state change. The user shifts focus. Maybe they start playing for the fun of winning bingo, but then they realize they need to learn the tools to win, so they shift to a serious attitude to memorize the shapes.
And because we established that learning is pleasurable, that state change isn't a bad thing.
Exactly. It's acceptable because the brain enjoys the mastery. You might stop laughing and start frowning in concentration, but you are still engaged. The text calls this passing from the pleasure of playing to the pleasure of achieving.
It's almost like the definition of fun we use in daily life is too shallow. We think fun means easy, lighthearted entertainment. But the fun that keeps us engaged is actually struggle. It's the struggle to master something.
It really frees us from the fun tyranny. As a designer or a teacher or a manager, you don't need to force jokes into serious topics. You don't need a cartoon mascot. You need to respect the learner's intelligence, give them a meaningful challenge, give them agency. That is where the engagement lives.
So putting this all together, we started by busting the myth that you need to be giggling to learn. We found out that the serious student, category C, is a success story. We discovered that fun is really just the brain rewarding itself for learning patterns, and we look at how we can use challenge, curiosity, control, and fantasy to drive that process.
It's a much more nuanced view than just gamification. It's about engagement design.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? Whether you're designing a training program or just trying to learn Spanish on your phone, stop looking for the confetti.
Right. Look for the challenge. Look for the agency. Are you making choices? Are you solving a mystery? That's where the learning happens. If an app is just giving you badges for showing up, that's extrinsic. That's not the deep ludic pleasure of learning.
And here's a final thought to leave you with, something that struck me while reading this. If ludic pleasure is actually just the pleasure of learning or problem solving, think about your workday. Think about when you tackle a really complex problem and you finally crack it.
That feeling of satisfaction, that yes moment.
Yeah. Does that mean that, biologically speaking, our brains treat a difficult crossword puzzle and a complex work spreadsheet in exactly the same way? Are we all technically playing at work without realizing it?
If the challenge is balanced and you have control, we just might be.
Something to think about next time you open a spreadsheet. Thanks for diving in with us.
A pleasure.